Students who are on with us, welcome to another great Green Springs activity. Our speaker today will be talking about law. Okay, so I know that many of our students have aspirations to become attorneys so that they can have Esquire on their name. And so this is a good opportunity for all of us to hear from a professional and to learn about what types of careers are out there.
So I'm going to quickly introduce our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is Ms. Tinuade Awe. She is the Executive Director of Regulations at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. She has responsibility for the regulation of the two primary stakeholder groups of the exchange, that is, the dealing members that trade on the exchange and issuers that have securities listed on the exchange. Her team is responsible for rulemaking and interpretation, monitoring, inspections, market surveillance, investigations, regulatory technology, and enforcement. She is a trustee of the Exchange Investors Protection Fund, member of board of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, FRC, and a non-executive director of the Central Securities Clearing System PLC, CSCS. Currently, she chairs the corporate governance committees of the boards of the FRC and CSCS. She has a law degree from the Obafemi Awolowo University, and she has a bachelor's from Obafemi Awolowo University, as well as a master's in law degree from both Harvard Law School and the London School of Economics and Political Science. She is admitted to both the Nigerian and New York bars. She is the recipient of the African Legal Awards 2018, General Counsel of the Year, Law Digest Africa Awards, General Counsel of the Year 2018, and Esquire Nigeria Legal Awards, and Esquire Nigeria Legal Awards, General Counsel of the Year 2017. Her interests include education, traveling, African art, gender and development. Ms. Awe is married with children. Thank you so much, Ma, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you with us.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me here today. It's always a real pleasure to spend time with young people, especially young people who are at this very key, important time in their lives when they have to make decisions. Thankfully, we now know that you make decisions, and the world is very fluid now. And when I was coming up, the world was not as fluid as it is now. Just as an aside, in those days, there were certain courses that it was okay to take and certain courses that it was not okay to take culturally. Now it's a bit more, things are a bit more relaxed. But today, you want me to talk about being a lawyer, and it's my real pleasure to talk about being a lawyer. So maybe I should start by telling you why I studied law. I studied law because I was good in subjects that were the subjects that you could take for admission to law. So that doesn't sound like a very good reason, right? I agree with you, it's not a very good reason. And I think the first lesson that I would like for you to take from my interaction here with you today is that you should study something that you're passionate about. You should study something that you really like doing. So I studied law primarily because when I was coming up, the subjects that were the qualifying subjects to study law, such as history, such as economics, such as literature, such as geography, were subjects that I liked. And I excelled in those subjects. Now, I was very blessed in the sense that I also excelled in science subjects. And so I did physics, chemistry, and biology, as well as history, geography, economics, and at some point, government. which were courses that we used to do in those days. And so I initially actually applied to university to study pharmacy because I was also good in the courses on the other side. Thankfully, both of my parents who were university academics felt that I was making a decision out of just being able to do the subjects as opposed to passion. And in my time, just as you have now, we had A-levels, which is not as rigorous a program as the program that you're going through now, which is the IB program. So they persuaded me to do art subjects for my A-levels. So I got admission to study pharmacy in UI, in University of Ibadan, and we deferred that admission. And then I went off to do art subjects for A-levels. And it was when I was in A-levels that I really realized that I loved the art subject. And the idea of becoming a lawyer crystallized. So another lesson that I would say there is that some of us take a longer time to get to where we're going. They take what I will call a more scenic route. It is not a problem if you're totally unsure. And so don't kill yourself about it. Just take, take your time and think through, talk to adults, talk to your parents, talk to your teachers. As I said, it was talking to my parents and with their guidance that helped me to get to where I was going. So what secondary school did I attend? I attended Queen's College, Lagos, which I understand is also Mrs. Koiki's alma mater. So that's the school that I went to, and I've already told you some of the subjects I took. Some of the other subjects were obviously I've told you about the scenic route that I took into university to study law. When I got into university, I really liked the study of law. It was very engaging, and I could see how law could be applied to ordinary things. So some of the courses that you do when you first start law are the law of contracts. And it was very easy to see contracts in existence. So you could see somebody, having an employment contract. You could see somebody having a landlord and tenant contract. You could see somebody having a contract for a plumber to come and work in their house. You could see somebody having a contract to build a road. That's a contract with the government. So law was not something far removed, and it is not something far removed from our everyday life. So I liked studying law. I studied at the University of Ife, which is a very beautiful university in the southwest of Nigeria. And it was a university that, because it's in a village, the people from Ife may not agree with me, so maybe I should call it a town. So it was very easy to just have a lovely student life and focus on you being a student. Nevertheless, law can be a very tasking subject. So I liked it, but I had to read very hard. And it is a very jealous subject in the sense that laws change every day. I don't know how many of you have been reading the news recently. We have a new companies law. The old companies law, it was a 1990 law. Now we have a new law. It's not yet effective, but it's coming into effect shortly because the president has signed the law. And that's how laws, they go through the legislative process and then the president signs, or what we call gives assent. Now, if you are a lawyer and you've been using this law of 30 years, it means you have to now leave the law of 30 years and you need to learn the new law, which is just about to become effective. So if you are not the kind of person that is constantly willing to learn new things almost every day, law may be a bit of a challenge for you. So I just use that example of the new law. If you've been doing something for 30 years, in a particular way for 30 years, the legislature and the president can come one day and they totally change, or they change a bit what you're doing. And that's what we've seen, that's what we're going to have in the new companies law. So that is a task in itself that can cause one to be quite, you know, it can cause a lot of stress for somebody who finds that kind of thing stressful. So one has to be very clear that when you're studying law, you're going to be reading on a regular basis because you find the law in the books. So it is not like certain courses where you may be able to do without reading every day, even though for every course you need to upgrade yourself. For there's no type of profession that you will get into now where you do not constantly need to upgrade yourself. But for law, it is ingrained in the profession that you have to keep reading. So if that is a bit of a challenge for you, you may not like law, even though I would commend it to you as a very good degree. There are different types of law. So I just told you about company law. I'm sure you've all heard about a very great Nigerian called Ganifaweimi. He was a lawyer, but he was a lawyer that was best known for human rights law. That is a law, the type of law where you are defending the rights and dignity of human beings. You know, was somebody tortured? Were they treated badly? Were they prevented from being able to speak somewhere where they had a right to speak? That type of law is called human rights law. I just spoke to you about the newcomer, companies law. And that's a different type of law again. So there are many different types of law, and those different types have different requirements. In this day and age, there is law around technology as well. So a lot of you know about companies called fintechs. Fintechs are companies that use that apply technology to the financial world. Let's put it that way. There's a growing group of lawyers that are interested in that type of law. All of you know entertainers like Two-Face, like Wizkid, like Davido, like Sinach, who is a gospel singer, Mercy Chinwo, who is another gospel singer. So you have all sorts of musicians. You also have artists. You have artists like Ramsey Noah. You have artists like, you know, you name them, different types of artists. There's a field of law called entertainment law. Entertainment law is about helping those people in the entertainment industry to preserve their rights. So that's another type of law. One of the things I like about law, and one of the things I would like you to consider, is that because there are different types of law, there are different ways in which you can apply legal skills. So some people do not like contract law, but because they like music, entertainment law gives them an opportunity to be in that industry. And that's one of the really good things that I would like you to take away again about being a lawyer. It is possible for you to know a lot of very different little things about many different types of professions because of your job as a lawyer, advising people that work in those professions. What kinds of qualifications do you need to get into university? Let's just talk about that very briefly again. I touched on it briefly when I was talking about myself, but I want to talk about it in relation to you. So it really depends on the university. So if you want to go to school in certain countries, such as in America, you have to do a first degree before you can do a law degree. And so none of you who are in your IB class would be able to go and get a degree straight away in the US. You would have to get a first degree before you get that degree. If you want to go to study law in Nigeria or in England, however, it is sufficient for you to do the courses that you do in your IB class or in an A-level class or in an SSS class, depending on which qualification you are going to use to enter. And in most universities, they would require that you have English language, clearly, which you would need for any course in either Nigeria or in the United Kingdom, because those are countries where the language of instruction is the English language. They would also often require certain of the arts subjects, So what are the arts subjects? Some of them are subjects like history, subjects like literature. The other subjects like economics, like government, like commerce are also courses that people that do law would normally do. In many countries, however, it's also possible to do law without doing those liberal courses. And the reason why that is the case is because lawyers, as I have said before, are able to help people who operate in different industries. And so the requirements for entry tend to be to look at the fact that a lawyer, even when they come in, is not only going to focus on law. There's nothing like just focusing on law. Law is a means to an end. It helps you if you're an entertainer. It helps you if you're a landlord. It helps you if you're a school proprietor and you want to have contracts with your teachers or contracts with people that have the catering staff or whoever is in your school. So that recognition has made some universities to be more liberal about the requirements, the course requirements that you must have done before you enter. However, because many people want to read law and because of the regard that people generally have for lawyers, and the fact that, as I have said, you have to keep reading, or at least you have to keep your knowledge up all through the time of being a lawyer, the qualifications tend to be very high. And obviously, the more competitive the university, the more competitive the qualifications are. So if one is a CDD student, you may have a more difficulty getting into a law degree. But what you want to do is to look at each university and see what qualifications do they need. What is the university's cutoff point? So when I was going to school, we had JAMB, which I know is still in existence, and you had to make very good grades in those subjects. That's your 5 credits as we had it then, and then very good grades in JAMB. So most likely at that time, you wouldn't be able to get into a law school if you made anything less than about 270 or 260, depending on the law school, over 400. Just to give you an idea how high the cutoff marks tend to be for law degrees. Now, it shouldn't surprise you that when you finish university, because I've said that with law, you continue reading, you continue having to upskill your knowledge. And so it's not, when you finish your law degree in Nigeria, or wherever you're coming from, if you want to practice law in Nigeria, you have to go to the Nigerian law school. In many countries, you also have to do something else after university. Now, you may not be required to go to a school like you have in Nigeria, but you will be required to do something called the bar exams. Let me explain what the bar exams are. The bar exams are the add-on after university. So we've talked about getting into university and the fact that you can do different types of subjects, primarily the subjects that are in the arts or in the social sciences is what would attract the law faculties to you. Then you work hard and play hard. You make the university pass through you, but you also pass through the university, if you understand what I mean. And then you come out with your university grade. When you are done, in Nigeria, you need to go to the Nigerian law school to get the qualifying certificate to practice at the bar. The bar is the profession of law. So it is not sufficient that you become a lawyer who has the academic qualification called a Bachelor of Laws degree, called in common law jurisdictions is called a Bachelor of Laws degree, an LLB. It is not enough that you have that. You also have to have the qualifying certificate that allows you to practice as a professional. So in Nigeria, you go to the law school. If you studied law in Nigeria, you go to the law school for 1 year. If you studied law outside Nigeria, you go to the law school for a little more than a year. You do something called Bar Part 1. What is the meaning of Bar Part 1? Bar Part 1 basically means that, let me step back a bit. You know, in Nigeria, you have a set of laws. In Ghana, you have another set of laws. In America, you have laws in New York. You have slightly different laws in California. All states in the US have their own different laws. So there are different laws in every country. Many of the laws are similar because a lot of law is based on what is reasonable and what is moral. So a lot of law has theological underpinnings. You know, it comes from what we all know is right and what is true and what is moral. But then different countries get their own laws, okay? So you have different laws in different countries. What the bar does, it then says, you've done the academic part, you've gone to university, very good, I'm patting you on the back. But in order for you to be able to work in this country, there are certain things that you need to know about the law in this country. Let me give you an example. So, assuming that in England, and this is just an assumption, don't let me use England, let me just use country A, country Lagbaja. Assuming in country Lagbaja, you cannot enter into a contract until you are 18. So the law will not recognize that you are able to enter into a contract. So if somebody enters into a contract with you at the age of 15, tough luck for them, because the law says you're too young to recognize your obligations under the contract. Now, in country Tamedu, that's a different country. That country says from the age of 15, you can enter into a contract. Now, if I went to school in country Lagbaja, in country Tamedu, and I think that, and what I was taught in school was that from the age of 15, I can enter into a contract. I then want to practice law in country Lagbaja, where, remember, the age to enter into a contract is the age of 18. You know, I have a problem. If you leave me, if you inflict me on the public, as my father used to say, he would say, you are inflicting all these young lawyers on the public. If you inflict me on the public, right, what will happen is that I will advise somebody that they can enter into a contract with a 15-year-old. Then, if the 15-year-old doesn't perform the contract, and the person now says, go to court, we will get to court, and the judge will do what? The judge will laugh, because the judge will say, where did you hear? What are you talking about? under the laws of country Tamedu, this is what occurs. I don't know what you're talking about, counsel, but clearly you do not know what you're saying, because you're thinking that this person can be a party to a contract 3 years before the law allows them to be. That's a very simple example, right? But you know, it can be much more serious than that. It could be much more serious than that. For the purposes of time, because I know that we have limited time, I'm not going to go into other examples. I just wanted to use that one as an example. So what the bar, the law school, the bar school, the college of law, depending on what it's called in different countries, does is it gives you the intricacies of the law in that, of legal practice in that country. And it also covers certain things that you don't cover in your years in university. So that is what you need to do. So I'm sure you've seen those people who wear wigs and gowns. The wig and gown is when you wear a wig and gown, it signifies that you not only have your degree, you also have the qualification to hold yourself out as being able to practice as a lawyer in that jurisdiction. So I remember I had a very good friend who read economics in Ife. Lovely, good friend, long-term friend. She's still my friend till today. She read economics and we graduated the same day. She went off to do youth corps. While she was doing youth corps, I was in law school. And so anytime we were going to go out for lunch, I would say to her, I am still a student, you are earning money, so you need to pay for the lunch. So that 1 extra year or 1+, depending on whether you schooled in Nigeria or you schooled elsewhere. Now, I've been talking about let's talk a little bit about some of the things that lawyers do. I talked about different types of lawyers. So right now, I am a lawyer. I use my law degree, but I don't use that law degree in the way that many of you think about lawyers. I don't go to court. I was a lawyer that used to go to court before, but I don't do that anymore. And I don't give legal advice anymore. So when I was being introduced, you heard something about being the general counsel. When you're a general counsel or a lawyer that works in-house in a corporation, you are giving advice every step of the way about the things that the corporate entity does. Do you understand me? What I mean is, if, for example, you're a lawyer that works with a cement company, you're giving them advice about things like, what does the law say about your taxes? The law says you should look at the Companies Income Tax Act, CITA, and that it says you're going to be taxed at X%. What does the company say? What does the law say about the expatriates that you want to come and work in your company? The law says you need to get something called expatriate quota. And you know, it's every day is different. You know, you're helping them, you're advising them. And sometimes you say to them, you know what, I think you want external counsel to also come and talk. And so what you're doing in that, so there's the lawyer that is in-house is called in-house counsel. And that lawyer, you can come in as a lawyer fresh out of law school, and then you can work your way up to become the general counsel or head of legal or chief legal advisor, whatever it is. Different people have different descriptions of what they use as the head lawyer in that institution. Okay? Now, those lawyers, sometimes they will say to their clients, their in-house clients, that's the management and the people that work in the company, will say, you know what, for this particular legal issue you're asking me about, I want to get you a lawyer from outside. And those are the lawyers who work in law firms. So you work in a law firm, so you can start as an associate in a law firm. You get straight out of law school, And if you work in the law firm where I started working in a law firm known as Bawo and Igodalu on Aolo Road in Ikoyi, Lagos. If you start in a law firm like that, then chances are that the first day that you start work, somebody's going to give you a big file and say to you, figure it out. Of course, you're not going to be able to figure it out, but they'll throw you into the deep end. And because of the background that you have, one, the high grades to get into university, doing well in university, and then the law school, you would be at least able to do something. It wouldn't be everything, but then you start learning from there. And so it is those lawyers in law firms that the in-house lawyers call for specific items. The in-house lawyers also call them because they are the only people that can go to court, other than certain specific situations that need not concern us here. The people who go to court are those who practice. So they practice in law firms. So I've told you about two types of lawyers. I've told you about in-house lawyers. I've told you about practicing lawyers who work in law firms. In-house lawyers who work in corporate entities. So they work in companies, so-and-so limited, so-and-so PLC, so-and-so partnership. They work in corporate entities. They work in entities. Then we've also talked about lawyers who work in law firms and who are described as being in what? In practice. You also have lawyers who work with the government. And those are the ones that work in places like the EFCC. So they go after people who they believe they have a case that of contravention of our criminal laws, and then they go after them. They go before a judge, they bring their case, and there's a defense. Guess who defends? The people who work in practice. Okay, so we've talked about those who work in corporations or corporate entities. We've talked about those who work in law firms. Now we've talked about some who work in government. Those are prosecuting attorneys. So they prosecute, like in the EFCC, there are lawyers that work there. We were talking about the different types of lawyers. So we've talked about lawyers who work in-house. That's the ones that work in corporate entities. We've also talked about those who are in practice. That's the ones that work in law firms. We've talked about prosecutors. Those are the ones that work in prosecuting authorities. They work with the police. They work with places like EFCC, ICPC, Ministry of Justice. Now, we can also talk about lawyers who work in-house, but with government. So they work in places like NMPC. They work in places like Department of this, Ministry of that, Commission of this, Commission of that. You also have lawyers like me who don't practice, don't give advice. So I don't practice anymore. I used to. I don't give advice anymore. So I used to. Now I simply use my law degree, but I don't use it for the purpose of practicing or for the purpose of giving giving advice in-house. What does that mean? It means that a law degree is robust enough, is the word that I want to use, that it allows you to use it as a base for other things. So many lawyers will use it to work in-house, which is what I used to do. Many lawyers will use it to be a lawyer in a law firm, or to be a prosecutor, or to work in any of the other things that I've described. Other lawyers use it as a base for other things. So because I work with a market, I work with the Nigerian Stock Exchange, it's a regulated market, so you have a regulatory function. Because I'm working with a regulator, and regulator means you are dealing with what? Regulations and rules and laws. So you are not advising about those laws, you're not prosecuting about those laws, but you need a law degree. Or let me not say need. A law degree is very helpful for you to be able to do your work as a regulator. And there are other jobs like that. Remember, that you also have law teachers. Those are the ones that teach you in university, okay? Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, you've heard of something called Queen's Counsel if you are in England. If you're thinking about England, or in Nigeria, we call the equivalent Senior Advocate of Nigeria. That is basically a lawyer who, according to the appropriate laws and regulations in the bar, has distinguished themselves such that they give them that honor. So it's almost like, you know, if you have a prefect. So everybody is in the IB class, but there's certain people in the IB class that have distinguished themselves by way of leadership, and so the school recognizes them as prefects. We're all lawyers, we're all in the same IB class, but that recognition is there. So that's the closest approximation that I can give to a senior advocate. In the past, it used to be for people who went to court. However, over the years, they've now expanded it to some of the other classes. So they've expanded it to law teachers. So you have a number of law teachers who are SANs. And a very popular one, let's look at the vice president, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, SAN. I'm sure you guys have noticed. So you can see the professor, meaning that he fits into that category of teachers who teach law in school. Then the SAN, because he used to work in a law firm, Simon Cooper's was his law firm called Simon Cooper's, where he was a partner. He is also very interesting because he was the Attorney General of Lagos State, which is the highest government lawyer in Lagos State. So what does this show you about law? You can be here, and then you move here, and then you move here, and you move here. And the categories of the ways in which you can practice are limited only by your willingness to apply yourself to the new challenge. So he could have said, well, I'm a professor, I don't want to practice. Or he could have said, you know what, I'm going to practice, but I'm not going to practice up to the level where I would distinguish myself as a SAN. Or he could have said, you know, when the opportunity to become Attorney General came, he's like, no, I don't want to go into government. But he's had a very varied career. And I commend people like that to you. You know, you can start in one place. The Bible talks about not despising the days of small beginnings. Start in one place as a lawyer and then expand to different places. It is one of the only professions that gives you that type of possibility to move from place to place while still retaining the fact that you are a lawyer. Now, let's talk about getting jobs. You're growing up in a time of COVID. The economy, frankly, you know, I don't want to lie to you, is not doing very well. And I'm sure because of your age, you're aware of things like their job losses and what have you. So we have an economy that is, you know, struggling. However, the good thing about being a lawyer is that no matter how much there's a struggle in the economy, they would always need lawyers. So remember when COVID, first of all, came to, you know, when we first of all started hearing about COVID, many of you may remember that the government came out with a lot of initiatives. They call them palliatives to help the public. Who do you think they needed to help them to draft and to make sure that what they were doing was legal? It was lawyers. Even if a company cannot pay, a company is doing so badly, maybe, you know, it's affected by COVID, and so, you know, people are not, maybe like a hotel, you all know because of social distancing, the hospitality industry is very affected. And so it cannot pay its workers, it cannot pay its suppliers, and, you know, what have you. If that company decides that, you know what, I am insolvent, meaning I cannot pay my debts when they become due. Do you know who it goes to? It goes to a lawyer and says, how can you access the insolvency provisions for me? How can you access bankruptcy for me? So a lawyer is needed even it's rain or shine. And that's why the versatility of legal practice is important. Because if the economy is good and you are a construction lawyer, fantastic. Every day, the government is building roads, building this, building that. The economy is bad and you're an insolvency lawyer, you can go into insolvency and defend. You know, so there's so many areas where folks can get jobs. I think one of the things that is important in this current world is the ability to read the times and the seasons. What do I mean by that? You are growing up in an extremely blessed time, in the sense that the world is changing and the world is at your fingertips. You have the internet, which is an oasis of information. You have various online classes. Many of them are free, especially if you are not interested in getting a certificate from them. If what you're interested in is the knowledge, you can go for the knowledge and decide that you will not get the certificate because what you're after is the knowledge. So that versatility at this point in time is something that I urge you to put yourselves into. Don't say, oh, I'm a law, I want to study law. And Ms. Awe has told me that if I study law, I should focus on liberal subjects to get into university. Yes, focus on liberal subjects. But it's the same Ms. Awe that told you that lawyers work in different places. So it's not a bad idea to understand the entertainment industry. And in fact, it's interesting. It's not a bad idea to understand all this science around COVID, because there's something called intellectual property law. When they get a vaccine, they're going to need lawyers to help them to protect the science behind that vaccine. So I always say to people, don't say because law, I just want to do my literature, I want to do my economics and my history, or, and my English language. Read outside the box. Lawyers should read widely so that any way the economy goes, they can thrive. So I think lawyers will get jobs in any type of economy, but not every type of lawyer. So the ability to read the trends and the times and the seasons. If I was advising somebody now that was going in to do a master's degree in law, and they said to me, I want to do the master's degree in construction law, I may question, why do you want to do construction law? Because I can see from the economy that there's probably not going to be a lot of construction for a little while. But if they say to me, I want to do a law and technology, I'll be like, go for it. This is the fourth industrial revolution. So you're going to do well. Go for it. Learn about technology. Learn what an API means. Learn about all those technology terms. What's the Internet of Things? What are, some of those things that you may not necessarily learn in law school, but they're interesting and helpful for you to be able to move on and be rounded as a lawyer. Getting jobs in Nigeria or getting jobs outside Nigeria. In any country, so let's start with outside Nigeria. I suppose that many of you will be going to universities outside Nigeria. So let's start with outside Nigeria. You finish a law degree in America, for example. You go first to do your first degree, because in America you have to do a first degree before you do law. And then you go to Columbia Law School, Harvard Law School, University of Pennsylvania, Stanford, wherever. You go to that law school and you do law. And so you want to know, what are the possibilities that I can get a job after? There are a number of things that you have to consider. And one of them is, if you are not American, then you're going to need to get a work permit. And reading the times and the seasons is very important. So if that is something that interests you, then you want to follow the events in America at the present time. Do you think, with the way that American immigration is going, do you think that there will be opportunities there for non-Americans? And I don't have to answer, I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm just saying that's a question you should think about, okay? If you want to get a job in England, you also need to consider the fact that you may not be a British citizen. And if that is the case, they also have work permits that you will need to get. Now, the thing about the UK is that when it was a part of the EU, there were rules in the EU, laws in the EU that required that the people that get priority with jobs are those who are either citizens of the country or citizens of the economic area, which is the EU. So before they would look for a job before a Nigerian would be able to get a job, or an American will be able to get a job, and a Singaporean will be able to get a job, they will look in England, Great Britain, the EU. You understand what I'm saying? So that's another thing that you need to consider. So people do it. I worked in New York for 7 years. So it's not impossible. But one of the things, if that is something that interests you, I always say to people, get into a very good school. I always call it the, what's the word that I call it? I say that you need to make sure that when the employer is looking at you, what they're seeing is not, they're seeing a very good candidate. They're not seeing your nationality and thinking about, oh, I need to get a work permit for this person. I don't want to be bothered about the work permit. So how do you do that? First of all, if it is an interest of yours to work in, if you go to school in the US or in the UK, to work as a lawyer in the US or in the UK, I would say try and get into what is ranked as the first 5 to 10 universities in that country. Because that shows them that you are a citizen of the world. You can do well anywhere. And then when you are there, go ahead and do well. If you could survive the rigors of an IB program, you can survive the rigors of a law program in the US or in the UK. So that's the major feedback that I have as somebody who's worked in outside the country. I would say to you, doing well, if you want to get a job, doing well, and I mean by that, getting good grades, ensuring that while you're in university, you allow the university to pass through you. So get those leadership positions in the societies. It can be anything from young lawyers society in your university to the Afro-Caribbean society. Think outside the box. Don't box yourself into the group of Nigerians that sit eating eba in somebody's house every weekend. There's nothing wrong with eating eba. There's nothing wrong in hanging out with people that have the same cultural background as you. But you can do that in Nigeria. So if all you wanted to do was to eat eba every weekend in somebody's apartment in London, while you're a student at UCL, you didn't need to come to UCL. You could have gone to my alma mater, Ife, and you will even eat better eba and amala there. So I always say to people, yes, locate yourself and sit down properly within your cultural group, but reach out, make friends. So if you're interested in getting a job, make friends with that Singaporean guy that is your roommate. Don't look at him and then be speaking about how he makes noodles every day. Find out why he likes noodles. It's all part of getting yourself into that position where you are a citizen of the world, so that the person interviewing you sees you as this strong lawyer, strong degree. He has a 2-1, he has a couple of prizes. He's, I see the transcripts, they're very good. He has some societies, he has good references from his lecturers. I am seeing talent. I am not seeing that I need to get a work permit for this guy. I am seeing talent. So remember that the fact that they need a work permit is you know, if you were at a level with other people, it's like, convert that to you know, with your with a tumble. You guys can ask me more questions around that. So, what do you need to be successful, you know, as a lawyer? I think I've already said some of them. One, you have to be willing to constantly upskill your knowledge. That is not it's not debatable, okay? So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you know, you're done with books once you drop out of law, once you're done with law school. It's a constant, every day. If you're practicing, there are new cases every day. If you're in-house, there are new issues, there are new laws every day, you know. So if one of your colleagues is caught at work, is caught by LASMA, you are not going to say, I don't know what the LASMA law is. You need to find out what the LASMA law is. You need to be able to defend that colleague against, or at least engage with LASMA, not against, engage with LASMA. And the way you do it as a lawyer is, you know what the rights of LASMA are, what their duties are. And so when they're speaking, you can speak from a position that is informed, not a layman position. Okay, so that's one. Tenacity is another one. Patience. So you have to be patient, because so, you know, the law does not easily reward. The word I want to use is, in the 90s, we had something called dot-coms. Dot-com business, sorry, the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. The dot-com business were the forerunners, in my view, of the fintechs that you have today. Young people who came up with a fantastic idea using business models that worked on the internet and made a lot of money very quickly. Some of them are still in existence today. Some of them came out, you know, they went very high and then they popped, okay, for various reasons that need not detain us. Very few, you didn't have any dot-com lawyers because it just didn't happen. The law is not that type of profession. It's not like finance. It's not like technology, where you can create a product and that's the product everybody's looking for, and it suddenly you blow, to use the words that I think may be familiar to you. In law, blowing comes with a lot of patience and some work. But when you know what you're doing and when you get to that level, it's very gratifying. A lot of the time financially as well as, you know, just knowing that you're in a position where you have information that can help other people. Because of all of this, being a lawyer can be both rewarding and stressful. So again, I'm not going to lie about that. It is stressful at times when you have to read loads. Maybe you're in the Court of Appeal and you have to read a lot of briefs filed by the other side in order to distill what they're saying so that you can help your client. It can be stressful because of the constant study, because sometimes you just don't want to study, you want to go off and do something else, right? But it can also be very rewarding when you help people. When you have a client who is, for example, an orphan that has been deprived of the estate of their parents, and you're able to use the law to help them, that is very, very rewarding. And so it's a profession that has both the stress and the reward in helping your clients to come out of a jam. Sometimes a client comes into your office, whether it's in-house or advice, and they think their life is about to end because of a problem that they have. Being able to walk through that problem is something that can be very interesting for lawyers. So I think what I should do is I should stop here so that people have an opportunity to ask questions.
I did want to ask though, because you just said that law. I mean, from what you said, and I know, like, my sister studied law and it was very intense. Will you really have time? Because you say, people should get involved in societies and clubs. Will you be able to dedicate time if you're working towards a 2-1 or a first class in law? I mean, can you still, is it realistic to say I will get involved in sports or in a society?
Yes, I think everything is about time management. And you actually have to learn that time management from when you're starting out. Because if you can't manage your time as a student, it's going to become only more difficult. So you're a student, a lot of the time, you don't have family. So imagine if you then add family, you add work, and you add constant knowledge acquisition to being a lawyer. So it's about time management, and it's about starting early. So precept upon precept. So law is one of those things where the precept upon precept analogy actually holds there. So it will be foolhardy for a lawyer to say, you know what, they're teaching me all this basic contract. I start contract law with offer and acceptance and consideration. And I'm not going to do anything until I'm not going to start reading until I get to a concept called specific performance. These are all concepts of law that I'm throwing out, okay? Wrong idea. So by the time they get to specific performance, they've built from offer, they've built acceptance, they've built consideration, they've built, breach of contract, remedies for breach of contract, of which specific performance is one. So if you wait till you get to that time, you are already lost. And remember, for each of these concepts, there's text, academic text, and then there's case law as you're reading, as you're digesting it. So law is really one of those courses that you start reading from day one. If you start reading from day one, you start doing your piano, your African voices in school, whatever society you want to join, debating society, whatever you want to join, you can manage it. Where the management gets out of kilter is when you don't start the reading from day one. It creeps up upon you. And so with law, you have to read from day one. You also play from day one. You add those hobbies from day one, and it will be easier.
Okay, thank you. Somebody is asking, she said you only mentioned USA, UK, and Nigeria. Do you have any idea how law works in other countries?
Those three are basically proxies for the others. And the reason why I say that they're proxies for the others is that in many countries, they're basically broadly two types of law. You have civil law and common law. Now, common law is derived from the countries that are in the Commonwealth. These are countries that are former colonies of Great Britain, and therefore Great Britain gave them its law. So when I speak about Nigeria, what I say about Nigeria is very typically applicable to British West Africa. So whether you're talking about Ghana, about Gambia, about Sierra Leone, that more or less, you go to school, then you have a law school or you have a bar program. Now, in civil law countries, a lot of the European countries are civil law countries. A number of the Arab countries are civil law countries. That is a different system of law that many of the Francophone African countries, the Portuguese African and Portuguese Spanish African, Spanish colonies, those are civil law countries. And in those countries, one of the major things is that, one, it takes a longer time to study law, and you don't get an LLB, you get different other types of, one of them is called a maîtrise in France. You get different types of other degrees that are equivalent to the LLB degree. So that's why I didn't go into them. But by and large, around the world, if you're going to do the majority of countries, they would either be common law or civil law, and they will take you through a civil law course of study or a common law course of study. If you're interested in ever coming back to Nigeria, it's easier for you if you've gone to a university in a common law country. Because remember that the law school will look at your degree and say, is this a degree they recognize for the purpose of practicing in Nigeria? And that will happen in any country because law is jurisdictional, very jurisdictional.
Yes, yes. Okay, so what about Canada? Do you know what kind of law whether it's civil or common?
It's both, because remember that Canada is a dual system country. There's French Canadian.
Yes, that's true. Yes. Okay. Okay, and of course, to study in Canada, they would need 4 years of undergrad and then a graduate degree in law, which is also 4 years, 3 to 4 years.
Which is like the US.
Yes.
So law is a graduate degree.
Okay, so your master's in law, so that means you also spent 4 years in law school, in Harvard Law School?
No. Okay. So let me
master's work?
Okay. So the master's degree is a degree that you do after you have done your basic law degree. So Harvard has a master's in law degree. So when you can either do something called a JD, a Juris Doctor, which is the equivalent it's a basic law degree. However, it is a basic law degree that, remember, is done by people who already have an undergrad degree. So there's a basic law degree in the UK, the LLB. There's a basic law degree in Nigeria, the LLB. In Singapore, the LLB. There's a basic law degree in the US, it's called the JD. However, you cannot do that basic law degree without having another bachelor's degree. You understand what I mean? So unlike in England or in Nigeria, where the prerequisite to enter into the basic law degree is the end degree of higher education, of secondary school, or an IB school, the terminal, and whatever entry exams for university JAMB or whatever it is, UCAS and co, right? For America, that entry is a university degree. So you will find that those who have JDs have actually been through the 4-year degree and then another 3 years in an American university studying law. So after the JD, you can then do a master's. However, Harvard recognizes both the JD and an LLB in order to do the LLM, which is the master's degree. It does not recognize the secondary school, the termination of secondary school certificate as an appropriate entry to do a JD. However, it recognizes the termination of university, terminating in an LLB or other law degree as a prerequisite to do an LLM.
Okay.
After an LLM, you can do an SJD, which is a doctorate. It's the equivalent of a PhD. So in America, the law degrees are JD, the Juris Doctor, LLM, and SJD. In England, it will be LLB, LLM, and PhD.
Okay.
PhD.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Now,
So
you have peculiarities like you have Oxford, where you have a BCL, and so there are certain universities, because of their history and their culture, they call their own degrees different things.
different name, okay, but it's essentially the same thing. Okay, so
yeah.
what if somebody wants to study entertainment? So how does law work? If I want to, let me say, specialize, let's say I want to do entertainment law, does that mean I will do a master's? I will go to I will study law as my normal undergraduate degree, and then do a specific master's and specialize in entertainment law? Is that how law works?
Okay, so no. So law is one of those things that can be learnt like a trade once you have the basics.
Okay.
Depending on how deep you want to go, and depending on how new the area is. So entertainment law is still a relatively
I mean, it doesn't have to be entertainment. I mean, like, even if it's criminal law, if I want to specialize in any law, would I have to do a master's in that law?
No, you don't have to do a master's in every type of law you want to specialize in.
Okay.
So it's not like architecture, for example.
Exactly,
where
yes.
The course of study is not done until you do that MH or MSc architecture, depending on what the university is giving, or the MH. In law, you can do your basic degree. Then depending on the university you go, they offer courses. So some universities will offer courses in entertainment law. So like any university, there are certain basic courses that they expect you to do: contract law, law of torts, criminal law, jurisprudence, constitutional law. Those are basic laws basic law courses that everybody has to do. Now the electives. So if you're interested in entertainment law and you are blessed in that your university has an entertainment law course, you add entertainment law to the courses that you do. And so your friend may be interested in sports law. The university offers a course in sports law, they add sports law. Somebody else is interested in law of the sea, they add law of the sea. Somebody else is interested in international trade law, they add international trade. So there are the basic courses, which is not, there's nothing strange about that. Most degrees will have certain core courses. So for those of us who went to university in Nigeria, there are your core courses and then your electives. So you can do the specializations in electives. If you're interested in something, it's very important that you go and look at the brochure for that school. What courses do they offer there? If you're interested in entertainment law, you might want a school that has a good entertainment law department, or lecturers who are familiar with entertainment law, and that is one of their areas of research. So they are teaching entertainment law. If you're interested in sports law, go and look at the brochure. Do they offer sports law there? So those are some of the things. Don't just choose a school. If you have a certain specialty in mind, choose the school because it has a good reputation. Choose the school because of where the alums are. Where are the alums? American universities are particularly good about creaming their alums. So they will tell you where their alums are. So you know where their alums are. Where their alums, what are they doing? Who is on their faculty? What have they done? What are their research interests? What, who have they written? Is it a lackluster faculty, or is it a faculty that has a lot of leading lights? And then look at the course offering. So those 4 things, I would say, look at them in choosing a law school. What is the course offering? What are they offering? In this day and age, if you have a university that is offering that doesn't have a lot of electives, then you may want to, think about another university, because the world is changing. So there's fintech law, there are all sorts of law. What type of law is your university offering? I see a question here. Can I answer it?
Yes. Yes, please.
So somebody says, still don't understand the difference between going to law school straight after university and deciding to do it. Explain it again. There are a number of degrees that you can get in a university. So there's the first degree, okay? Basically what I'm saying is that in Nigeria and in many other countries around the world, you can do law as a first degree. That's your bachelor's degree. In the US and in Canada and a number of other, in the US at least, let me speak particularly about the US, let me not speak about Canada, the US. In the US, there are requirements to get another first degree before you do law. So in the US, just like with medicine, in the US, you cannot do medicine immediately. You have to go and do another degree before you can do medicine. So a lot of people will do things like chemistry, physiology, whatever, before they go off and do medicine. In the US, a lot of people will do English, they will do philosophy, psychology, whatever, medicine, all sorts of degrees that you could go and do before you can do law. So it is not a master's degree. It is simply a degree that you must do another degree before you do. The JD is a degree, a law degree, that is your first law degree, but it must be preceded by another university degree. So I think that's basically it. Now, after a JD, you can do a master's. Just like after your LLB, which is your basic law degree as well, you can do a master's. So I hope that that clarifies that. Ma, how can being a lawyer help you as a businessman? It can help you because you know the laws. And so when you are dealing as a business person, even if you don't remember the law, you remember where to look for it, or you remember where you need to be careful. So you may not know exactly what you need to be careful about, but you're like, oh, am I not skirting around negligence? Am I not skirting around, I seem to think that the law requires me to get a license for this thing. Let me go and look at it and find out whether I need a license. So instead of groping sometimes with legal issues in the dark, when you're a lawyer, it helps you in the sense that you're not groping in the dark. You have an understanding of, you may not know the answer, but you know that you need to look for something. So in the example I gave about the 15-year-old and the 18-year-old being able to become a tenant, right? If you're a lawyer and you're a landlord, you don't need another lawyer to tell you. One of the questions on your intake form will be, are you above 18? And if the person says no, you don't even need to, whatever. You don't even need to get into a relationship with them. So being a lawyer helps you to just be able to do business that much better because you have an understanding of when legal issues occur, and you can use that legal knowledge to help you to deal with those legal issues. You know when to ask for advice, you know when to stop, and so on and so forth. What do I do as a lawyer? What do I do? I don't, as I said, I am a lawyer and my law degree is important to the job I do, but I don't do any of the, I'm not in-house, I don't advise anymore, and I don't prosecute, I don't go to court. Being a lawyer, having a law degree simply helps me to be able to do my job better. So it kind of links to the question that Benedict asked about how being a lawyer helps you as a businessman. So you don't need to be a lawyer to be a regulator, but as a lawyer, I am better able to comprehend regulation, what types of regulation we should make. I'm better able to comprehend whether something is fair, whether something is legal, which is all very, very important for the work that I do. So I hope that that answers that question.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. It was very, I think it was very informative. And let me just, I think basically the bottom line is, first of all, people need to be good in subjects that they want to do. That's in the subject required for law. They need to be very good and they should follow their passion. And I think the most important thing that you said that I picked up was people should be, anybody that wants to be a lawyer should be constantly willing to learn new things, because they're going to be reading regularly, the laws are going to be changing, so they always need to be able to upgrade their skills. So for every student that is listening, those are the key things you need to know. You need to be constantly willing to learn if you're going to succeed as a lawyer. I don't know if Dr. Wilson, if you have any parting words for us.
Yes, I do. First of all, Mrs. Awe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also want to mention that Mrs. Awe is also a proud Green Springs parent. And I understand that your child or your children are on the swim team. Is that right? They're swimmers?
Yes.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed what you had to say, and I'm sure everyone else did too. I just want to say a couple of things that I heard you say, just to kind of reemphasize it. You said that good grades matter. And you said that if possible, try to get into a top law school, because once you get in that school and you become an alumni of that school, that network matters. Where you went to law school matters. You also said that there are many different types of law. I want to just share with everyone, as a professional, doesn't matter what kind of profession you go into, if you're going to be a doctor, a dentist, a person who owns an automobile shop, an artist, you need a lawyer to be on your team. You know, I'm a business person outside of what I do here. I use a lawyer every single year. Every single year. If I don't have a lawyer, I can get into trouble. So just having a lawyer and having now, as a business person, I have to have some knowledge of the law. You also mentioned what happens in the U.S. Since I'm in the U.S., I just want to say one thing about that. To get into law school in the U.S., you can have any undergraduate degree. You can have your bachelor's degree in any field. It doesn't have to be pre-law, as long as your grades are good, because law cuts across every field of study. So it doesn't matter if you study music, there are music lawyers, sports, there's sports lawyers, engineering, there are intellectual property lawyers. There's lawyers needed for every single field. And I just want to thank you for the energy that you brought to this. I noticed that we had 50 participants. To the students who are listening in, when we put out these career fair notices, you better get your seat quick. Come into the seminar quickly and get your seat, because you can see it fills to capacity very quickly. This was a powerful session, a very powerful session. Mrs. Awe, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Has a better understanding. The last thing I noticed is that there are probably as many adults listening as children. So that's pretty interesting to kind of notice. I see a couple of parents when the cameras come on, I've seen mostly adults. And so what you're saying is something that people need to hear at any age, the power and the strength of a lawyer. And I'm very grateful to lawyers. And so I'm very grateful to you as well. Thank you, Mrs. Awe.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure spending time with you. As a member of the Green Springs community, I'm always very pleased to spend time with the community. So thank you.